Hi, my name is Rebecca Weisman. I will be doing a presentation today on King Henry VIII, and we will be looking at two films, one story. My partner is Grace Black. She will be uploading her own presentation that we've worked together on. So the introduction to the two movies are we have Anne of a Thousand Days and we have The Other Bowling Girl. These two movies were made about 39 years apart, and they're all about King Henry VIII and his marriages, in particular his marriage to Anne Boleyn. So it's a parallel story, but told from two different points of view. They have two different versions of King Henry, the dynamics of his relationships, and we will take a look at if the visual, the aerial, if the thematic, and the chronological or ineffective or effective in telling the truth claim. So first is Anne of a Thousand Days. Anne of a Thousand Days has an implicit truth claim to it. There's nothing explicit throughout the film. They do refer to Henry VIII. They refer to the time period that he was alive. And at the beginning of the film, they refer to this is based on a play, but there's nothing throughout the film that says that this is based on a true story, or there's no other written claim throughout the story. So visually, there are a lot of things that aid us into aid the truth claim in it. First and foremost is the lavish outfits that they had, their hair, the general landscape and the scenery, the castles. Everything had a very good feel that this could possibly be about the real King Henry, and in the 1500s. Queen Catherine was probably the most impressive to me. I think they did a fascinating job, or fabulous job, in picking the actress that they did. I think visually, she looked probably the most correct with authenticity, with age, with her stature. So I think visually that made us feel like this was very accurate. A couple of the things that kind of threw the movie off a little bit was the lighting. It was probably the most distracting thing for me, was the lighting seemed very filtered, and it didn't seem true to the 1500s. King Henry, the character Richard Burton that plays King Henry in this movie, was rather small in stature. I think Richard Burton's about 5'10", average build, and King Henry is 6'2" and 350 pounds. So I think they could have did a little bit better job of making it believable that he was a larger man, especially towards the end of his life. There was one scene where Anne Boleyn's alleged lover, the music teacher, was being tortured, and you see his dental fillings in the scene, and that of course is very inaccurate to that time period. But I think overall they did a really good job with the characters. I think that Anne was the actress that they chose for that was very well as well. Chronologically, there were some really good things. I think that the reluctancy of Anne, showing the nature of her being reluctant, her realizing that this was more for power and money, and then eventually falling in love was a good story. I think that they did that very accurate. I think they did a very good job of showing a really long love story and a lot of information in a very short period of time. Whether it was accurate to that time period, I didn't do research outside of it, but it seemed very fitting to that. Things that were not effective chronologically, them opening up with the execution or the discussion of the execution, wanting Henry to sign the forms, threw me off a little bit. I thought it was not very good placement, and it didn't transition very well to the next scenes of the movie. The disappearance of Catherine throughout the entire movie did not add up to me either. I think that it made this story not seem like it was going in order. From the time that Catherine had Mary to the time of her death, Mary would have been approximately 20 years old, but they certainly didn't tell a 20-year story. The characters didn't age 20 years, so a lot of these things didn't quite add up to me. The truth claim in The Other Bowling Girl is something that Grace is going to talk about, but it's both implicit and explicit. So probably one of the hardest things for me was the aerial effects, and it's hard for me for any movie. Just because it's something I don't pay that much attention to. But the one thing that stood out was the birthing scene. The character Natalie Portman that is playing Anne did a tremendous job making us feel like she was actually giving birth. That was probably the scene that stood out the most, that made me have buy-in to the movie. There were some things that kind of stood out as well when they were bringing Henry to see Anne. The music that they played didn't meet up with how you would feel Henry would feel going to meet at it, and it seemed very gloomy, so that didn't seem fitting for the situation. And then the dogs that were barking throughout the movie, their mouths weren't moving, so that made it difficult as well. That you could definitely tell that there were some issues there. Thematic. So the things that were very effective there were Cardinal Wolsey on this display of corruption in the Catholic Church. I think they did a very good job of showing that and not making it overly taboo. I think another thing was it showed a better version of a love story than Power than the other did. So to me, it embraced Anne actually falling in love with Henry and not doing it just for the power and for her family. Things that were not effective with this were Anne stealing Henry from Mary. By all accounts, he was done with Mary at that time, and it made the character or Anne Boleyn seem very vindictive, and it just didn't seem to fit what most of us already knew about the story. And it's hard to believe that Henry would have fallen off the horse and just automatically given up on Anne and went with her sister. So I think that those two things they didn't demonstrate very well. It was a very turn on, turn off kind of effect, and I wasn't very appreciative of the rape scene. I think it was non-fitting in the movie, and it just the placement wasn't good. It wasn't a good fitting for the movie. Grace is going to go over the conclusion and how we felt it best displayed our historical claim, but I think overall we had two really good movies that showed us two different versions of King Henry VIII. Thank you.